let's show us some support.
Thanks so much, Elaine. And even if I wanted to, you might hear my voice is a little raspy. I got sick just as we were entering into National Transit Equity Day this Saturday. So I may be a bit of a space cadet, and but I'm sure if you have lots of questions, I would love to answer any questions as we go through and get this. So I may be a little on the slow side tonight. So as some of you may have heard, this Saturday was National Transit Equity Day. And this time around, so last year we did the first National Transit Equity Day ever in this county. And that was a lot of fun. People really had a great time. We had some really great speakers, and you can check all of that out on our website, equitytransit.org. We have an event page from last year. You can hear all the great speakers from last year. And we had some leaders from Watsonville, Vanessa Quiroz-Carter. We also had Felipe Hernandez, and they said, hey, we would like to come speak, but then we want you to come down here and do this event in Watsonville next year. So it was a challenge. And there was another individual from Watsonville who also challenged, it was kind of a personal challenge. And I'm sitting and going, yeah, I want to do it, but oh my gosh, I'm really scared because as much as I love Watsonville and I love the community of Watsonville, the people, the families, there's such a richness in the Watsonville community. I myself didn't have connections, but I did promise that I would do it. So there you go. What we decided to do actually was a week of events. And so we called it Transit Equity Week. It started last Monday. We had this amazing panel because a part of transportation and successful equitable transportation integrates with safe streets, and it integrates with housing, and it integrates with how you build your communities. And so all these conversations are really crucial to each other. How you build your transportation centers and you build your housing around that makes transportation more equitable and accessible, frequent, and all those things. So we had a great group of panelists this Monday. It's all recorded. So if you go to our event page now, the recording of that event is online and you can watch it. So can I share my screen? I will. Right now it looks like it's disabled.
Okay, let me see, because I'm not the host. Jane, let me see if I can give you access. It has to be Jane.
You're co-host now, Lani. Go for it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, let's see. I'll share that. And can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, looks a little funky in my end, but we will make do. Okay, so we had a week of events. The first was the panelist event. The second event was a movie night, which we talked about safe streets and tactical urbanism. It ends up that all of these things tend to impact our Black and Brown communities the worst, including the safe streets aspect. And so we talked about how we can all be active and participate in this process. And Elaine, I think you said the magic word that I really love to hear over and over again, and that is collaboration. We can't be lone islands and expect that we're going to get anything done successfully. The way we really are powerful is that all of our organizations together, you have Ecology Action that believe it or not, they focus on safe streets as well, and environmental aspects and environmental justice. Friends of the Rail and Trail, SC Can, there's just this huge coalition of organizations, and as lone islands, we're not going to be able to do much. And so how can we come together to really address these issues that I see as breakthrough issues? If we can address all these integrated issues, I just feel so excited that things are going to shift hugely in our future. And so that's really what Transit Equity Day is about. It's bringing the awareness, they say educate, agitate, and organize. And then I tack onto that, activate. So we have to activate other people outside of our organizations to understand why it's so important, and get them to cheer it on and write the letters and do all those things. Yeah, so last week was all a part of that. We had the movie night on Wednesday. Then on Friday, we had a Safe Streets bike ride in the rain, which was fun. I think that maybe what made my cold go over the edge. And then on Saturday, we had a great coalition of organizations that came out. And I'll have pictures up and some video as well for that event coming up. We had great speakers at that event. And as you all know, in Santa Cruz, it was pouring rain because I got home and my son said, "Mom, it's been raining all day. How was it in Watsonville?" And I believe in miracles. And in the middle of Watsonville, in the middle of the rainstorm and the rest of the county, we had these moments of sun and warmth. And I thought that was just wonderful. We also had rain, and as the speakers came up to speak, literally it was just pouring down, but we were all under these tents and people just hung out and just powered through it. It was amazing to me. So that was exciting. I also want to check in terms of time. I wasn't given a time frame, so I want to get a sense of how much time I have.
We go till 8:30.
Yeah.
Okay, if you get tired of me speaking, you just let me know because I can rattle on. Or if you have any questions, stop at any point. So, National Transit Equity Day was founded in 2018, and it was a collaborative coalition group effort of national organizations, state organizations, all these organizations coming together, including the National NAACP, the Sierra Club, a number of labor organizations. There's a long list of organizations that came together, and they established this day, February 4th, represented and honored in honor of Rosa Parks' birthday, which was, of course, as you know, her pivotal role in changing the face of equitable access to transportation in this country to Black and Brown members in this nation. So you can see some of the posters here. You'll see her face all over the place posted, and it's just really beautiful how just the education around this. And actually it may be not intentional, but it also falls at the very beginning of Black History Month. And so I think for a lot of communities that can have a very strong meaning as well, to celebrate both of these things. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that transportation has emerged as crucial to escaping poverty, actually more so even than crime, or if you have a single family or double family household, or a lot of other factors that might come into play. So there was a huge study that Harvard did over a period of well more than 10 years, and it looked at thousands and thousands of families, and it ended up that access to equitable public transportation or equitable transportation was crucial to escaping poverty. I just want to show this picture, and this relates to access in general. So when you think about traffic in the streets, you can look at this picture of what it takes, a whole bunch of people in a bunch of cars, versus, if they're just sitting there. If they're on bicycles, it takes up less room, but still a lot of room. And if they're in a bus or on a train or a trolley, that would be on a train. And this might be looked a little mixed up. I didn't get a chance today to go through all of these and order them properly. But transportation has the power to transform communities, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to play for you a short video. I hope it'll play through the interwebs here. This is on my website, not my website, but the Equity Transit website. Can you all see this video in the corner there? The Robert Bullard video?
No. No, I don't. Nope, don't see that.
Okay, let me see if I just need to share in a different way. Okay. How's that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. This is just like 50 seconds.
I think we have to let people understand that they have a right to access to transportation. See it as a right, not a privilege. And particularly when we're talking about public dollars being spent to redevelop, to redesign, to refurbish and revitalize. And we have to make sure that low income, middle income, and affluent folks understand that this is something that will benefit all of us, because transportation is the biggest barrier to a job. And if people are not working, there are going to be consequences for that. And so I think to see it as a societal issue that we all must come together with. And there's no substitute for organizing. And it won't just happen just because somebody wills it to happen. We have to come together and organize. I think we have to let people understand that they have a right.
All right. I really appreciate what he says in that very short video, because he talks about a lot of things. That is the importance of access to transportation, the importance of organizing to make things happen. And the fact that this impact upon certain socioeconomic aspects of our society actually impact all of us, everyone across the board. And so there's a lot of economics around that, which I'm not really going to go into, but it's pretty substantial. Dr. Robert Bullard is considered the father of environmental justice. He's written numerous books, but some of them go into this transportation aspect as well. And of course, transportation and the environment and environmental justice go side by side. So, oh, and I do want to mention before I get into a little bit of this history is that what is access to transportation? Why is that important to so many people who are oftentimes left behind in our society, not considered? And it's not just our socioeconomic and our Black and brown communities, but also our youth. So if you think about it, if certain people, if our community relies only on cars to get access to opportunity, connecting with friends, connecting to jobs, our youth then are cut out of that because they might not be able to drive unless they can get a ride from their parents or someone who's older. Also, people with disabilities. So for example, I have a good friend who is a spokesperson for the blind community. And for her, her income as a family is too much for her to easily ride paratransit. She can't get a ride on paratransit unless she pays a lot of money. Same with the other so there's paratransit and the other one, which paratransit and Lyft line. So that becomes a real problem because it doesn't allow people to have freedom. And without access to opportunity, you don't have access to freedom. And so for her, she has to then potentially rely on other people. And that doesn't make it easy for her to get around to go to the doctor's office. Her husband recently had a potential stroke. She couldn't get to see him very easily. So because she's blind, she can't just drive to visit him. So people with certain disabilities may be completely cut out of access to opportunity if there isn't robust, frequent public transportation. Shopping, going to the library. I know she expressed, just being alone when you can't easily get out and you don't have easy access. So a little bit of history. A lot of people in our communities today, especially younger people, don't realize that in this country, we actually had the #1 public transportation system in the world at one time. And we had this amazing trolley system. And actually in Los Angeles, it had one of the most robust public transportation systems in the world in LA alone. What ended up happening was that companies like GM and other industries very decidedly and very systematically, what they did was they transitioned us over to buses. And buses, unlike the trolleys, which were clean, they were frequent, they got people where they needed to go very quickly. People loved them, they didn't smell. GM started introducing these buses, and the buses actually, even though they were public transit, were smelly and stinky and they were rough to ride on and people didn't really like them. And so it was a way to transition people to cars. So what ended up happening is almost overnight, these trolleys were destroyed and the tracks were ripped up by these industry-minded people, and that were really more concerned about their money and promoting their industry, like automobile, oil, tire, trucking, asphalt, all of these folks that were car-centric industries. And it's really a shame. This is the Red Line, the Pacific Red Line in Los Angeles. So many of these trolleys were destroyed. What ended up happening is that a lot of people started to protest, but the protests, at this point in time, government ruled everything, and people didn't have as much power as maybe they do or do not today. I think people certainly try to assert power more than they do. But people were steamrolled through this whole process, and a lot of communities did protest. Some won and some did not. What you saw here is that despite the protests, interestingly, in some areas, protesting these highways and byways that were basically laid down in the backyards and bedrooms of Black and Brown communities. Well, why was this done? Well, it was segregation by design. So big highway builders decided, we're going to lay down all these highways. These are all red line districts. And what ended up happening is that communities of Black and Brown and lower economic status ended up on the, in quotes, bad side of the tracks, really the highway. And so they were cut off from jobs, they were cut off from education, opportunity, and also from communicating with other groups of people that they might need to communicate with and gather with to have success. And what's really interesting is that this segregation that happened is impacting us still today, impacting cities across the country still today. And so we talk about, for example, in places like Georgia, that people can't get to vote. They can't get to the polls easily to vote because they don't have easy access to transportation, because transportation lines were ripped out. Or in some places that cities are still dissected, and so people still can't get access to opportunity. And even here in our own county, we see accessibility issues between the North and the South, people that have cars, people that don't. There's people that live in Watsonville who've lived their whole lives in Watsonville and have never been to the beach because they don't have a bus that easily goes to the beach, and they may not have a car. Any questions or thoughts? And I can't see the chat, just so you all know, so I apologize when I'm in this mode. So you can see here that a lot of people did protest this, and some of the places that were successful in stopping this huge laying down of highways and byways in the backyards was actually in San Francisco. There's a really great short movie that talks about, there's a long movie that talks about the history about how San Francisco fought very hard, Mayor Alioto and other folks, to actually prevent this from happening in San Francisco, what was happening across the country. So you can see a little example here of a before and after. And here's an example of some of the roads to nowhere. So this is on the upper left. This is a classic example of a very famous road that separated, when it went in, separated the communities on the left with the communities on the right that really relied on each other for business and commerce and all the things that families and communities need. And in the lower left hand, you can see the red line district through which the highways were built. So one of the things that I say is civil rights activists worked for over 100 years to establish rights in transportation, which of course, Rosa Parks was one of many, many civil rights activists who worked very hard for this right, and in 1955 overturned, the fact that Black and Brown community members couldn't ride on certain areas in the buses, and so that was huge. But in the little over a decade, all of the work that over 100 years of civil rights activists did was undone, because this laying down of highways basically systematized racism and classism since the 1940s and 50s. And so we've been fighting that ever since. These same issues exist today. They still are pervading. They're still building more highways. We're trying to fight it. And it's really important to understand why. And why we really need to have another choice. It's not that we should just magically get rid of cars. That's not going to happen. But we need to move in the direction to where public transportation is not just seen in this country as, oh, it's the thing that the poor people ride, or the Black people ride, or the brown people ride, but it's actually the thing that we should all be riding as much as possible. And that's where our prioritization financially should be, with, with government finances in the direction that we put our energy, because it really serves all of us economically, equitably, and environmentally. So this is from the APTA, and I'm not going to read through it, but it basically talks about the economics of the importance of public transportation and how it really impacts all of us. And when you look at some of the great there's some really great videos later on, I'm happy to send those out. They talk about how when you have a well-designed community that's accessible easily through this robust transit, that it actually builds up the economics of a city. So it's not even just better for your personal pocketbook and mine, because we don't have to spend so much on buying a car and keeping the car up, but it actually improves the entire economy of our cities and everybody individually. So it's a huge multi-prong effect. Environmentally, economically, equitably, all these things are impacted. The only one who doesn't receive the benefit as much from it, of course, is the industries who are car-centric. So if you think about other countries, of course, that are way more advanced than we are. So what was interesting was in the 40s and 50s, we kind of went backwards and fell into this, we were lulled by the marketing through the automobile-centric societies and the power of the money. And other countries at the same time, ironically, they were very similar. They were all like us in that we were looking at cars, and cars were kind of cool, but they made some different choices, and their choices were to move ahead with public transportation and really pour a lot of money into public transportation. And for those of you who've traveled abroad, in many of these wonderful countries, you can jump off an airplane, hop on a train, and get just about anywhere in many countries. The other really beautiful thing about prioritizing public transportation, it isn't that these countries don't have cars, but because the cars are minimized, you have a lot more of your environment that's spared and beautiful. And I lived in Switzerland. I lived and worked in Switzerland for a while. And I just was amazed how their freeways were just small little 2-lane freeways. The cars were small. And then you had all this beautiful countryside in between the cities to enjoy. So it protects your environment as well. I just want to make another point, because it's not on this video, is that even in our country in the 50s, we had something called the key system here in the East Bay area. I don't know if anyone has heard of the key system, but it's a train trolley system. And from all the way from Santa Cruz, you could go on multiple trains and get all the way almost to Sacramento. And the key system was mostly on the Bay Area and the East Bay, but it was very popular and really cool. And I have a video all about it I can share. The other thing that I like to point out is that automobiles contribute a huge amount of toxins into our environment. And why this is important is it's actually not just the greenhouse gases that come from tailpipes, but rubber tires are some of the most toxic substances that we produce regularly and that get introduced into our system regularly. And so if you think about tires, as you're running your car on the road and you have a brand new tire, and then some hundreds of miles down the road, that tire is pretty much worn out. Well, you have to ask yourself, where did all that rubber tire go? And guess what? It went into our air, water, and soil. Those toxic substances, my background is in biochemical endocrinology, so kind of a nerd, but I can tell you that it takes very little of certain toxic substances to have a huge impact. And so one of the things I point out is that if you look at the time at which cars and rubber tires and a lot of these toxic products, including plastics that were kind of introduced all through the fossil fuel industry, and you look at the trajectory of these products alongside a lot of the health challenges, diseases, and issues, whether it be cancers, neurological diseases, gut dysbiosis that you're seeing more and more today. We're seeing Alzheimer's, which is a neurological potential gut disorder, autism, and other things, cancers. All of these diseases really started skyrocketing, kind of in sync with a lot of these fossil fuel products and tires. And you can see here on the left, this is from the EPA. It talks about how pollution tire wear is 1,000 times more, 1,000 times worse than the exhaust from the tires. And what we're finding now, people talk about microplastics, which are, mini pieces of these plastics. I say that the stuff that we're talking about that's rubbing off the tires is actually volatilized tire. Well, what does that mean? It's like spray, right? The spray of the tire that just goes everywhere. So it's even more fine and even more dangerous than a microplastic. So I'm going to skip through. Let's see. I also want to mention something about social connection. So maybe less so now, but for those of you who have traveled a lot in other places like Europe, where public transportation is pretty common and people go day to day in public transportation as well as longer trips, you might find that there's a higher level of what I call the empathy factor. So having public transportation as a natural part of our transportation system tends to bond people more to each other in a polite way. People tend to be more polite. If you think about it this way, you're in your car and you are 5,000 pounds of metal, right? Imagine when you're driving down Highway 17. I can tell you I drove Highway 17 for over a decade, for a long time. And it's like the dog-eat-dog racetrack. Get out of my way. I'm going to try and get in front of you faster than you can get in front of me. Can I speed ahead of that guy? Can I get, it's a crazy, crazy situation. And I think that breeds a very individualistic kind of mentality and society that has pervaded the United States in many ways. So I'm not saying that all of a sudden, if we had trains and buses, that we would suddenly be super nice to each other all the time. But actually, there's a really great TEDx talk about this that really talks about how when we use public transportation, we tend to meet new people. We tend to communicate more with strangers. We understand each other a little better. So there really is something to the social connection aspect of public transportation, which is very positive for our society. And I think we've lost a lot of that being so individualistic. And I might even posit that having us stuck in cars all the time has made us more individualistic. Nobody wants to debate me on that. Come on, guys. All right. You probably heard this term, induced demand. Is there something better? I just find it so interesting that all the research shows that you just keep widening highways and you get more traffic. And even Caltrans, if you go, Caltrans even says this on their website now, 10 years ago, there were still maybe they still are, but they were still trying to push highway widening. And now they're like, oh yeah, induced demand, it's a thing. And yet we're still widening our highway here in Santa Cruz. It's a little crazy. Bus on shoulder, yes. Highway widening, no. Some positive things. So I am a big believer, back to what Elaine was saying earlier, that we can make change. I know we can. Other places have done it. And here's a perfect example. Utrecht, back in the 1970s, they were having, similar to what we're seeing, a huge problem with traffic violence. Kids were getting killed. People were getting hit by cars. Does this sound familiar? This is what's happening in our community here. Well, what happened was the community really just rose up, and they literally, there's pictures of people lying in the streets with their bicycles protesting. And they said, enough child death. We're tired of it. We're tired of a car-centric environment and community. We need to change. And so on the left is an example of streets in Utrecht that, as they were back in the 70s, and on the right, how it is today. So I show this because when I've talked to people over the last decade, and I say what is possible, I get a lot of, especially older people, who say, that's not possible. We'll never get out of our cars. Blah, blah, blah. It can't happen. Well, it can. I know it can. We just have to work together to make it happen. Here it happened in Bordeaux, France. And in New York and San Francisco. So guess what? There's cities, even in the United States, who are starting to realize that creating these walkable, bikeable, safe street cities actually does it not only protects our cyclists and pedestrians more, it's more equitable. But the other thing is it actually brings more vibrancy and resilience and economic vibrancy to these communities. There's a number of great books. One is called The High Cost of Parking. What we're realizing and what the studies are showing is that the more you put parking garages into the cities, the more it brings cars and the more it decreases the vibrancy. And how we build our communities and our housing and all of these things integrate, so important. We have to have integrated communities and well-designed transportation systems. Another little point that a lot of us don't think about is urban noise pollution. And actually, noise pollution has a huge impact on us physiologically. That you think about the whales, for example, and the noise pollution they undergo, it's pretty impactful to them, but it's also the noise impacts us as well, not just from hearing loss or sleep loss, but there's cardiovascular issues, anxiety and stress. Inability to relax and mental health issues. We just kind of get used to it, but we don't realize how much we're actually impacted. And then the silent health crisis of traffic violence, which I spoke to earlier, is huge. This is really important, and it's also integrated with how we do transportation. Again, it's back to this really independent, aggressive aspect of how we've kind of formed ourselves. But I also want to step to the other side, which is to say our infrastructure and how we create our streets here in the United States, in most cities and in California, does not support the safety of our most vulnerable people walking and biking. The way our streets are designed is very specific for the speed of cars. So I know all of us realize, you see the speed signs, it says 25 miles an hour. I live on one of those streets. The street sign says 25 miles an hour. How fast do the cars really go? Well, on my street, I can tell you they sometimes go over 60 miles an hour, and I live across the street from a county park with kids and down the street from an elementary school. So how safe are our streets? And can we change that? And yes, we can. just to give a perspective, what's really critical is that we get cars to slow down on these streets, on our city streets. It's okay if they go fast on the highways, that's what they're for. But on our city streets, what they found in places like Utrecht and other countries that have kind of been implementing these things sooner than we have, is that if you keep the speed under 30 kilometers per hour, and that's about 18 to 20 miles an hour, then if somebody happens to be hit, there's very little chance of them dying. But what happens is if once the speed of a car gets to 30 to 40 miles an hour, the chance of somebody dying is very high. And so the infrastructure that we choose to create going forward is really critical. And how we change that is really important. I'm going to pop through these just really quickly. These are actually local statistics done by the Community Traffic Safety Coalition. I've joined this organization. You can too. This is one of these great coalition organizations where it's people from all different groups throughout the county, and we're all working together to make it safer for everyone. And I think interestingly, I might have mentioned this earlier, is that the most impact of these serious injuries and death actually is much higher in low income communities, as well as communities of Black and Brown, our Black and Brown communities. This is a great series. I suggest you watch it, and please hit me up to send you all the links at some point. Again, this goes back to the economics of how we develop. And so it's super really interesting and important. Let's see. Okay, this is just the tire industry, kind of hitting on that again. I apologize. I didn't get a chance to finish these back ones. Okay. This is from Transit Equity Day last year. And okay, I want to move on here. A couple things I want to say is that our local Metro is working very, very hard to change Metro. We have a new CEO. He's amazing. The old CEO ran the Metro kind of into the ground and made it not so good. But we have a new CEO and he's very committed to changing it. I urge you to listen to the panelist discussion from Monday, because there's a lot of crucial information in there on what they're working on and how this will all help our community. But one of the things I just want to mention, because not everybody knows this, is that we, of course, have our own rail line that we as a community own through the RTC. And that rail line goes from Watsonville to Davenport. But what's really critical, so there's two things that are really critical about this rail line. First of all, that rail line will connect Watsonville to Santa Cruz. And why is that so critical for our community? Well, a lot of our community members that work in Santa Cruz, North Santa Cruz, actually live in Watsonville. And to have a quick, easy, reliable, low-cost way to get back and forth is going to be fantastic. They can get to UC Santa Cruz, Cabrillo, their kids can go to Cabrillo. It's such a great opportunity for South County to have access to North County through this very reliable means. Right now, they rely on the buses, and oftentimes they sit in the traffic waiting for the buses, just like the cars, but they have to wait for the buses themselves. And so it can take 2 to 3 hours to get to work for people from Watsonville to Santa Cruz. The other cool thing and critical thing about this rail line is it will allow us all to connect through Pajaro to Monterey, Salinas, Gilroy, San Jose, San Francisco, and well beyond. And that's all these lines that you see here. So what that means is that we all get better access via a train, which is environmentally sustainable transportation, to all these great cities in California. And so I think that's amazing. To me, I cannot wait for the day that I can jump on my train, our train, and go to Monterey, for example. And I'm a cyclist. I coach mountain biking, as you heard earlier, with kids. And it was like, oh my gosh, we could take our bike on the train. We could go to the park, go up to Natural Bridges or Nisene Marks or wherever, to these different parks, and jump on our bikes or go hiking. I have a personal thing. I would love to jump on the train with my girlfriends, go up to Venus, have some drinks, not have to drive, and then be able to come home without driving with all my girlfriends. So there's all sorts of benefits. But when I was a mom and young, I could have gotten, you could get the kids to soccer and to the beach and to all these other places very easily by the train, because the train, of course, goes along this, all through these little towns that we have in our community, and hits all these parks and schools. The kids can take the train to school as well in many cases. My son took the bus. Okay, I think I'm going to finish it up there, and that was pretty long-winded. So any questions that anyone has? Comments?
Yeah, folks, if you can, you press on that reaction button to raise your hand so we know that you have a comment or a question for Lani. Thank you so much, Lani. That was a really comprehensive presentation.
Yes, so I hope it was helpful. I appreciate the time. And
Thank you, Lani. Looks like Angelique has her hand up.
Yeah, so going back to the beginning of your presentation, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to listening to the panel. I heard it was really good, and maybe checking out some of the videos too. But back at the beginning of your presentation, you said something that I don't understand, which was tactical urbanism.
yes,
Tactical urbanism.
yes, I didn't have pictures in this slide deck. I apologize. If you can bear with me, I can pull up a really cool picture of tactical urbanism and then give a little description of it.
Great.
Now, are you able to see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if that's going crazy or not. So this is just one example of tactical urbanism. What tactical urbanism is, there's two forms, and I say there's the regular form and then the guerrilla form. So tactical urbanism is where the community says, oh my gosh, we have this serious problem in our community. People are dying and getting hit by cars, and it's not safe. So we're going to get out, because it can take 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, sometimes 10 years for the local public works, for example, to raise enough money to do permanent long-term infrastructure changes like what you see here. And there's some better pictures. I'm going to see if I can pick some out.
We're
We
not
can't see your
seeing-
new share.
Yeah,
You're not seeing my share. Okay.
we're seeing your slides still.
Oh, okay.
The National Transit
share.
Equity Day.
You're sharing. New share. Got it. Okay. I see. I have to delineate that. Okay, now you should be able to see.
Yeah.
Okay. So here is a good example of tactical urbanism. So you see what the community did here was they actually get paint out. In some communities, they'll put plungers. I have a really good movie I can share with you. It's fun. It's only 8 minutes, but I won't share it today. But I can email it to all of you. In some communities, they're going out and they're getting cones, and they're putting cones down with flowers in the cones, or toilet plungers. They're getting out and they're painting. What they're doing is community members are taking charge and saying it's going to take too long to get formal, official, long-term infrastructure implemented. So let's do something temporary, or maybe even longer term, together, that creates this safe environment for our kids. This is happening right now across this country and across many other countries as well. If you Google tactical urbanism, you'll see pictures in like Bogota, and countries throughout the world. and New York and other places. And what's really cool about it is that people are owning it and feeling empowered about the fact that they are taking back their cities and making their cities safe. Then there's guerrilla tactical urbanism, which, as the name explains, it's people who are like, I'm tired of my cat getting hit out in front in the yard, out on the street. I'm going to go out and put cones and do it quietly in the middle of the night without permission. So in some cases, people are working with their city officials to make the changes and saying, look, we've got 500 people in your office. We need change now. We're willing to go out and do it. Let's work together. Or a few people are also doing more guerrilla stuff and saying, we're going to go out in the middle of the night and we're going to make the change. In some cities, there was one city that they actually did that to bus lanes. They went out and painted bus lanes overnight, and the buses now use them. So, both of these things can work. I find that Santa Cruz tends to be a little bit uptight about some of this kind of stuff, but I'm hoping, again, the more we work together, the more our voices are, backed by numbers of people, then they'll be like, okay, we see there's something that needs to happen. And part of the reason why it needs to happen is because our traffic violence has increased just in the last few years during COVID over 30%. And then from 2019, 10 years prior, it increased like 65%. So you're talking about a traffic violence epidemic that is impacting us. And what happened locally is that they put some cones and they tried to do some separation here on the east side I can never remember the name of the street, but it's kind of on the east side towards 41st. And somebody just mowed it down. And so you get this aggressive perspective, which is, and I heard it the other night at one of our movie night events of, well, it's the bicyclist's fault that there's a problem. It's not the driver's fault. And really what we're moving to is, it's really an infrastructure problem. We need to shift the infrastructure first so that people, your lanes are smaller. You don't have wide lanes that people can just see all the way down and speed. You can see from all of this pictures here that people, it's a little confusing. And so people have to slow down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. That was a long-winded answer. I apologize.
It's a good answer.
But here's some more pictures. Any other questions?
Lillian, did you have a question?
Well, it was partially answered. I just wanted to thank you, Lani. And also, I really resonated. I really do think this is also a sort of a change of this car-centric control, need to be the one in control of the vehicle kind of idea. I think that the whole mind change thing, and the fact that, the car-centric society is definitely isolating us from each other. That's very deep. And I think one of the things I think it indicates to me is that there's got to be also a mind change. But it was very provocative, this whole presentation, and I thank you. I just wanted to know, what agency does this in this county, what is it that, are focus issues that people can both educate and get active with? If you could just point out a couple of those things that are going on. I think you did, but.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one organization that I just kind of recently joined is called the Community Traffic Safety Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
And if you Google that, it should come up. It's run through the county. But also Ecology Action. And there are a number of organizations. I would suggest that if you look at our event webpage for 2023 that we just did for Transit Equity Day, you'll see a lot of organizations at the bottom. And a lot of those folks are involved, like Go Santa Cruz County with the RTC. And it's the same, I would say the same thing about all these organizations. We know now we can't just operate alone. All of us have to work together. And so jumping on a couple of those groups and staying in kind of aware of what's going on. And I'm happy to send all of this to you if you have a list of things, and I can also send you a list. It can be overwhelming though. So I don't want to send you too much. I have a whole reference list, which is like 20 pages long.
Well, I think we have access to your website, which is a start. And
Yes.
yeah, so thank you. Yeah.
And Lani, if you're willing to share your email address in the chat too, maybe people can follow up individually as well.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. It's and I'll just say it as well. It's equitytransitsantacruz@gmail.com. And thank you all for your patience. I know that was a long, that was a long presentation.
Thank you. It was very informative. Does anybody have any other questions before we wrap up for the evening? If not, let's like show Lani some more love again, and for this amazing presentation, her taking the time this evening to walk us through this, her work in the community, her leadership in the community, and let's support her, by joining her organization and see how we can lift that up as well.
Great. I just want to share that most of what we do during the year is I say this lovingly, we sit through long, boring meetings like the RTC, the Bus Metro, all these meetings. And then once a year we pop out and say, Transit Equity Day, we're going to have a big event. Come and join us and help out. But if you sign up, I promise I'm going to try. My next step is to get a newsletter somewhat regularly. It won't inundate you. And there's a lot of organizations I can really recommend that you sign up with their newsletters because they're really good about, they have maybe more money or bigger, a bigger base of regular process and that sort of thing. So, but all of us working together, it's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you again for coming.
So much.
Thank
you.
you.
Really appreciate it.
Good night.
Well,
Good night.
have a good night, everybody. Look forward to seeing you in the community.
Good night. Yeah.
Good
Good night.
night. Thank you.